Welcome to Cluster Fudge, the podcast where we pull apart the knots of culture, power, and identity. I'm your host, Alexandra. Today's topic is one that affects every generation, every class, every profession, and quite frankly, the very future of civilization. Education. In a world obsessed with shortcuts and viral success, where TikTok hacks are replacing textbooks and influencers are seen as authorities on everything from medicine to law, we need to pause. We need to ask ourselves, what happens to a society when people think watching a few YouTube videos makes them a doctor? What happens when we dismiss years of rigorous academic training in favour of bite-sized misinformation? Because let's be clear, we still need doctors with medical degrees. We still need lawyers who've passed the bar. We still need engineers, scientists, teachers, nurses, trained, credentialed, and held to a standard. Not everything can be learned through a 60-second reel. Let's dive in. Let's begin by unpacking the core of this episode. What education truly offers and why it's so much more than a piece of paper, a GPA, or a cap and gown selfie. Because somewhere along the way, we started to forget. In an era dominated by fast content and instant gratification, the meaning of education has been reduced to a simple transactional value. How much money will I make with this degree? How fast can I finish school? Is college even worth it anymore? But education, real education, is transformational, not just transactional. Knowledge versus information. Let's make an important distinction. Information is everywhere. It's free, it's accessible, it's abundant, but knowledge is curated, it's contextualized, it's tested, it's earned. Yes, you can Google symptoms, you can watch a video on brain surgery, you can read a thread on climate change, but none of that is the same as understanding. True understanding comes from deep study, peer-reviewed sources, mentorship, error, correction, experimentation. In other words, a process. Education teaches you how to think, not just what to think. It gives you the tools to evaluate the quality of information, not just consume it. Because let's be honest, we don't have an information shortage. We have a discernment crisis. One of the most overlooked aspects of education is the cognitive rigor it demands. Whether you're writing a thesis on international law or solving differential equations, you're not just memorizing facts, you're exercising your brain's ability to analyze, synthesize, evaluate, predict, interpret. These skills are crucial not just in a classroom, but in life, in voting booths, hospitals, boardrooms, courtrooms, and personal relationships. Without formal education, or at least the skills developed through it, people often mistake opinion for evidence and popularity for truth. That's how we end up with conspiracy theories on ballot boxes, anti-vax movements, and people thinking they can manifest medical diagnoses away. Education also teaches you how to express complex ideas clearly, defend your position with logic, and change your mind when presented with better evidence. In other words, it teaches you how to be a better human in dialogue with other humans. It helps you challenge ideas without attacking people. It fosters humility, because in academia, you learn very quickly that you don't know everything. You might start a semester convinced of one worldview and end it realizing that your perspective was limited or even deeply flawed. That process of unlearning and relearning is the heart of growth. Social media rarely encourages this. In fact, it rewards the opposite: certainty, arrogance, echo chambers. But in higher education, complexity is embraced. Nuance is expected, ambiguity is explored. Let's talk about expertise. To become a doctor, you need over a decade of education, training, exams, internships, and residency. To become a lawyer, you study constitutional law, legal precedents, courtroom procedure, and still might fail the bar exam. To be a scientist, you need to understand not just your results, but how you got them, why they matter, and how they compare to existing research. This level of depth cannot be replaced by a TikTok tutorial or a podcast episode, not even this one. The internet democratized access to information, yes, but it also flattened the hierarchy of credibility. Now, a college dropout with 2 million followers can say something completely false, and it will travel farther and faster than the words of a seasoned expert. But education, formal, institutional, rigorous education, still matters. It's not just about knowing facts. It's about proving that you know them in a setting that challenges, tests, and validates you. Another gift of education is institutional accountability. If a university professor publishes false or unethical work, they're investigated. If a med student commits malpractice, there are consequences. But on the internet, accountability is a comment section, or worse, none at all. Institutions aren't perfect, far from it, but they still have structures in place to verify, vet, and correct. That safety net is vital in fields where lives, laws, and livelihoods are at stake. Would you let a person who learned medicine on YouTube perform your surgery? Would you hire a defense attorney who got their legal strategy from Reddit? Let's hope not. You don't have to be a political scientist to vote, but understanding how laws are made, what the Constitution actually says, how history informs the present, what freedom of speech truly entails. These are vital for preserving democracy. Educated citizens are harder to manipulate. They're more likely to participate in their communities. They're more equipped to detect propaganda, resist authoritarianism, and hold power accountable. That's not a luxury, that's a necessity. Finally, education offers something that is absolutely essential to a functioning democracy. It offers more than knowledge, it offers wisdom. It offers more than grades, it offers growth. It offers more than a path to income. It offers a path to integrity. In a time when misinformation is monetized and expertise is questioned at every turn, education isn't optional, it's essential. And when we come back, we'll explore what happens when we replace that education with influencers, algorithms, and shortcuts. Stay with me. Let's talk about a phenomenon that's grown at an alarming rate: the rise of DIY experts. People who, without formal training or accredited education, brand themselves as authorities on topics that often require years of study, experience, and oversight. You've seen them, you've scrolled past them, you've maybe even paused to listen because the content is flashy, persuasive, confident, and perfectly packaged for a 60-second scroll. But let's be very clear, confidence is not competence, and having a ring light and a platform does not make you an expert. From content creators to experts, in the age of social media, almost anyone can slap the title coach, guru, consultant, or expert onto their bio. They might not have a degree, they might not have any certifications, but they have opinions and followers. And suddenly, they're seen as credible. We're watching a dangerous shift where influence is replacing expertise. Health influencers are diagnosing chronic illnesses. Wellness coaches are prescribing fasting protocols. Finance bros on YouTube are giving out investment advice that could bankrupt someone. TikTok creators are telling people not to trust vaccines, therapists, or mainstream media because they did their own research. But doing your own research is not a substitute for peer-reviewed science, clinical trials, legal precedent, or professional ethics. That phrase, do your own research, has become a euphemism for I Googled something until I found a result I liked. The illusion of expertise. Here's the scary part. These DIY experts often sound exactly like real ones. They use the same buzzwords. They quote studies, often out of context. They present themselves with authority, and because they're good communicators, charismatic, well-edited, relatable, they become more persuasive than the actual professionals. Why? Because the truth is often complicated, but the lie is easy. It's convenient, entertaining, marketable. Real doctors will tell you, it depends. It's more complex than that. There's no one-size-fits-all answer. DIY experts will tell you, this herb cured my cancer. The government is hiding the truth. Big Pharma doesn't want you to know this. One gives you uncertainty with integrity. The other gives you certainty with deception. Guess which one gets more views? The algorithm doesn't care about accuracy. Social media platforms are attention economies. They reward engagement, not accuracy. An endocrinologist breaking down the nuances of insulin resistance? 40 likes. A TikToker dancing while telling you to cut out all carbs and fire your doctor? 400,000 likes. The algorithm pushes content that provokes emotion, especially fear, outrage, and false hope. And that's where DIY experts thrive. They're not accountable to ethics boards. They're not subject to malpractice suits. They're not required to show their work. In the past, a person with fringe beliefs had to publish a book, attend a conference, or find a publisher. Today, they need a smartphone and Wi-Fi. The Dunning-Kruger effect on full display. This entire trend can be summed up by the Dunning-Kruger effect, a cognitive bias where people with limited knowledge or competence in a domain vastly overestimate their own understanding. They know just enough to sound smart, but not enough to know what they're missing. And the real danger is that these individuals are not just wrong, they are confidently wrong, which makes them dangerous because people are looking for answers. They're overwhelmed. They want help. And when a charismatic stranger online says, "I have the secret they won't tell you," it's tempting to believe them. When DIY expertise turns deadly. Let's not mince words here. This is not just annoying, it's lethal. People have delayed cancer treatments because of influencers who claimed raw juicing could alkalize tumours. Mothers have rejected vaccines because of viral TikToks putting their children and others at risk for preventable diseases. Young people are following advice from fitness influencers without understanding basic anatomy, leading to injuries, eating disorders, and long-term harm. Financial influencers have convinced people to invest in crypto scams or pull money from retirement accounts based on internet hype. In every case, real people are harmed. The influencers? They walk away with more views, more sponsorships, and more credibility in the eyes of an audience that doesn't know better, because they were never taught to know better. The rise of DIY experts also contributes to the undermining of real professionals. We've started to see a toxic skepticism where every doctor is corrupt, every academic is biased, and every expert is part of some elite agenda. It's not healthy skepticism. It's nihilism disguised as empowerment. And it leaves people vulnerable, not just to misinformation, but to manipulation. Because when you don't trust institutions or experts, you're more likely to trust charlatans. The DIY expert becomes your doctor, your therapist, your financial planner, and your spiritual guide, all in one. It's cult-like, it's dangerous, and it's growing. DIY isn't always bad, but it has limits. To be fair, the internet has made some incredible things possible. People can access open source education, learn skills like coding or cooking, get mental health support, find resources they never had before. DIY learning has real value, but it must have boundaries. When it's about personal growth or curiosity, great. When it crosses into areas that impact lives, health, safety, and legality, that's where we draw the line. Because while curiosity is free, expertise costs something. Time, study, sacrifice, accountability. And that's what makes it valuable. DIY experts are everywhere, loud, confident, unregulated, and dangerously influential. But just because someone can share advice online doesn't mean they should. And just because they believe they're an expert doesn't mean they are. In our next segment, we'll explore the institutions we use to trust and how they've both failed us and become more essential than ever in fighting this epidemic of misinformation. Stick around. Let's talk about what happens when the lines blur between real expertise and performative confidence in high-stakes professions, the kind where a single decision can save or ruin a life. This isn't about gatekeeping. This is about public safety, ethical responsibility, and societal stability. Because some jobs actually require professional training. Some careers demand deep, rigorous education. And no matter how many books you read, podcasts you binge, or TikToks you repost, there is no substitute for formal, accredited, supervised education when it comes to these fields. Let's break it down. We don't need TikTok doctors. We need MDs. This might seem obvious, but in the age of natural remedies, biohackers, and social media health influencers, we need to say it louder for the people in the back. You cannot TikTok your way into practicing medicine. Doctors are not just people who know about the body. They are professionals trained to diagnose complex and overlapping symptoms, understand pharmacology, side effects, and drug interactions, recognize rare conditions and subtle warning signs, handle emergencies, triage patients, and perform procedures with legal and ethical boundaries. And they do this after 4 years of undergraduate study, usually in the sciences, 4 years of medical school, 3 to 7 years of residency, board exams, licensing, ongoing continuing medical education, CME. Yet somehow, a growing number of people believe that because someone on Instagram drinks chlorophyll water or does ice baths, they're health experts. Being healthy isn't the same as being qualified. Just because you feel good on a carnivore diet doesn't mean you understand how it affects kidney function, cardiovascular health, or long-term hormone regulation across populations. We need trained doctors with degrees, with oversight, with accountability, not social media influencers selling supplements and fear. Let's move into another high-stakes field: law. A profession that governs your freedom, your rights, and your protection under the Constitution. There's an entire wave of legal misinformation flooding platforms like YouTube, TikTok, and even Reddit, where so-called legal experts misinterpret statutes, oversimplify constitutional rights, encourage people to represent themselves in court using cherry-picked case law, push conspiracy theories about sovereign citizens or tax resistance movements. But here's the truth. Real lawyers don't practice based on vibes. They go through law school, bar exams, ethics courses, clerkships, and supervised practice, not just so they know the law, but so they understand how to apply, interpret, and argue the law effectively and within bounds. And if they screw up, they can be disbarred. Social media lawfluencers? Not so much. There are real consequences when people take legal advice from unqualified sources. They can lose custody, go to jail, ruin their finances, or fall prey to legal scams. Legal misinformation is not entertainment. It's dangerous. Think you can build a bridge based on a YouTube video? Think again. Engineers, civil, mechanical, software, aerospace, and beyond are responsible for the physical world we live in. They literally design the things that keep us alive and safe every day. Buildings that don't collapse, cars that don't explode on impact, water treatment systems that prevent cholera, electrical grids that power cities, aircraft that can defy gravity and return safely to the ground. That level of responsibility requires calculus, physics, materials science, fluid dynamics, safety codes, simulation testing, licensure, and lives are at stake if they get it wrong. This isn't an industry where close enough is good enough. There's no influencer content, no AI model, no tutorial that can replace an engineer's education and experience. When you're responsible for people's safety and infrastructure, trial and error isn't a cute experiment. It's a public disaster. Science, it's not just about data. It's about method. The internet is full of people who cherry-pick scientific studies to support whatever point they want to make, from climate denial to vaccine skepticism. But science isn't just about knowing facts. It's about understanding the scientific method, how data is collected, how experiments are controlled, how hypotheses are tested and retested, how results are interpreted, peer-reviewed, and replicated. A single study isn't proof. A TikTok clip of someone exposing the truth isn't science, and doing a Google search doesn't make you a researcher. Scientists go through years, decades, of training to understand not just what we know, but how we know it, and how to test what we think we know. That's what separates rigorous inquiry from confirmation bias. We need real scientists in labs, universities, and fieldwork settings, not influencers in front of ring lights talking about the microbiome because they watched a documentary. Ironically, some of the most disrespected professions in the public discourse are also the most essential to every other high-stakes field. Teachers. They're not just people who show up and assign homework. They are trained in pedagogy, how people learn, curriculum development, child and adolescent psychology, classroom management, differentiated instruction for diverse learners, and they're shaping the minds of future doctors, engineers, lawyers, and scientists. Yet, we live in a society where anyone with an opinion on education policy, even if they've never spent a day in a classroom, thinks they're more qualified than the professionals. We must stop undervaluing education itself, because when we do, we're undervaluing every profession that relies on it. Training isn't elitism, it's protection. There's this idea floating around that insisting on degrees and credentials is somehow elitist. It's not. It's protective. Credentialing ensures standards, holds people accountable, creates recourse when harm is done, protects the public from bad actors. Would you get on a plane flown by someone who learned on Flight Simulator? Would you let someone operate on your heart because they watched Grey's Anatomy? Of course not. But when we let untrained people become the de facto authorities on the internet, that's exactly what we're doing, metaphorically. Some careers don't just require passion, they require proven competence, tested under pressure, scrutinized by peers and enforced by law. You can't TikTok your way into surgery. You can't Instagram your way through the courtroom. And no matter how many followers you have, you can't influence your way into understanding quantum mechanics or constitutional law. We need to push back against this idea that real education is optional, especially when lives, safety, and public trust are on the line. In our next segment, we'll look at how society benefits economically, culturally, and ethically from maintaining a strong, respected educational pipeline. Because this isn't just about career credentials, it's about the kind of civilization we want to live in. Stick with me. Let's talk nuance, from your host, Alexandra. We've been talking about the vital necessity of formal education, how real training, real credentials, and real experience are irreplaceable, especially in high-stakes professions. But let's take a step back. Let's address the elephant in the room. Isn't college kind of broken? And the answer is yes, and also not exactly. Because the reality, as with most things in society, is layered, complicated, nuanced. So today, let's not do hot takes. Let's not do college is a scam versus college is the only path. Let's dive into the middle. The truth with all its thorns. Let's be clear, the American higher education system has deep flaws that must be acknowledged. The cost is outrageous. Tuition prices in the US are some of the highest in the world. The average annual cost for a public university in-state hovers around $27,000. And private universities? We're talking $50,000 to $80,000 a year, depending on where you go. That's not just unaffordable, that's a sentence. Over 43 million Americans hold student debt, totaling over $1.7 trillion. This debt follows people into their 30s, 40s, even retirement. It delays home ownership, starting families, and economic mobility. That's not education, that's a trap. The system can be gatekeeping and elitist. There's also the culture around elite institutions, Ivy Leagues, legacy admissions, SAT coaching, donor influence, where access is often more about wealth and connections than raw talent or potential. It creates a two-tier society. One group goes to top schools, networks into top careers, and continues the cycle. The other scrambles for scraps, burdened by loans, working multiple jobs, or locked out entirely. That's not meritocracy. That's manufactured inequality. So yes, college as it currently stands needs serious reform. We should be talking about tuition caps, public funding, free community college, modernized curriculums, vocational and technical paths, diversity in faculty and leadership. We should be doing all of that, but without throwing away the whole system. Now, here's the other half of the story, the part that often gets drowned out in college is a scam TikToks. Higher education still holds immense value, not just economically, though that's true, but intellectually, socially, and democratically. College graduates still earn more. Despite the debt crisis, the statistics still overwhelmingly show that people with college degrees earn more over their lifetimes than those without. The US Bureau of Labor Statistics shows that high school grads earn $40,000 a year on average. Associate's degree holders earn $48,000 a year. Bachelor's degree holders earn $67,000 a year. Master's degree holders earn $81,000 a year. So while the upfront cost is daunting, the long-term return on investment, ROI, especially for in-demand fields, remains strong. College builds critical thinking, not just career paths. A lot of people forget that college isn't just about job training. It's about developing your mind, learning how to research, write, question, and analyze, understanding history, systems, literature, data, and design, interacting with people from different cultures and backgrounds, being exposed to ideas that challenge your worldview. These are not just soft skills, They're the foundation of a functioning society. We don't just need coders, we need citizens who can tell truth from lies, complexity from simplicity, logic from manipulation, and higher education, when done right, cultivates that. College is about structure, not just content. You can technically find any piece of information online for free, but education isn't just information, it's organization. College provides a structured curriculum, feedback from experts, a progressive build-up of concepts, accountability through exams, labs, and papers, mentorship, community, collaboration. You don't get that from clicking on random blog posts or watching one-off videos. You don't get that from the algorithm. You get that from a guided intellectual journey. False dichotomies are hurting the conversation. We need to stop pretending it's Harvard or nothing, debt slavery or drop shipping, 4-year degree or total failure, because that's not real life and it's not helpful. There are multiple paths: 4-year universities, community colleges, trade schools, online certifications, apprenticeships, boot camps, lifelong learning. Some people thrive in academia, others are built for entrepreneurship, some want to become artists or welders or professors or data analysts. We need to dignify all those paths, while still defending the importance of rigorous training for careers that require it. Let's stop pretending college is either a golden ticket or a useless scam. Let's talk about how we improve it, make it accessible, and reimagine it for a changing world without abandoning it entirely. And in many cases, it's still the best infrastructure we have for developing serious expertise, informed citizenship, and cross-disciplinary innovation. The key is balance, knowing that education is essential, but also knowing it needs reform, accessibility, and adaptability. The answer isn't to burn the whole thing down, it's to build something better, without giving in to cynicism, shortcuts, or shallow self-learning that's really just algorithmic noise. Coming up next, we'll explore what a healthy education ecosystem could look like, where vocational training, higher ed, public schools, and digital tools work together to build a smarter, more capable society. Because the future won't be built on hot takes, it'll be built on earned knowledge, compassionate wisdom, and accountability. Stay with me. Let's say it plain, a 4-year college degree is not and should never be the only path to success. In fact, insisting that every human being must go to college to make it is not just elitist, it's fundamentally untrue and out of step with reality. But on the flip side, this popular pushback narrative that college is useless or degrees are obsolete is just as harmful. This segment is about drawing the necessary line between careers that genuinely don't require formal academic credentials and careers where lives are on the line or systems are at stake, and therefore real rigorous education is non-negotiable. Let's get into it. Some careers don't require a degree, and that's a good thing. We need to say this louder. College isn't for everyone, and that's okay. The world needs electricians. The world needs plumbers. The world needs hairstylists, welders, mechanics, delivery drivers, chefs, farmers, carpenters, roofers, baristas, coders, gig workers, designers, artists, dancers, massage therapists, and UX testers. And you know what? Some of these people make 6 figures. Some of them are more skilled, more stable, and more fulfilled than many people with Ivy League degrees. You can be master at your craft without ever stepping foot inside a university classroom. Many trades offer apprenticeships, learning directly from seasoned professionals, licensing exams, technical certifications, on-the-job training, all of which provide practical, focused, real-world expertise, often without debt and with quicker entry into the workforce. In fact, the skilled trades are essential to our infrastructure. Without them, society literally falls apart. So let's kill the outdated stigma. Blue-collar work isn't less than. It's foundational, it's respectable, it's smart. And with rising tuition and declining ROI in some industries, we should be encouraging more people to explore alternatives to college, not guilting them for not taking the academic route. But some careers still absolutely require a degree now. With that said, let's swing to the other side of the pendulum. because there's a dangerous movement brewing online, especially in social media spaces, where people begin to blur the line between DIY learning and formal, licensed expertise. Let me say this clearly. There are careers where learning from YouTube is not just irresponsible, it's deadly. Let's talk examples. Doctors and nurses. Imagine going under the knife with a surgeon who never went to medical school. Imagine being diagnosed by someone whose training came from watching videos and doing their own research. Medicine is not about vibes, it's about anatomy, chemistry, pathology, epidemiology, diagnostics, ethics, clinical rotations, surgical precision, evidence-based decision-making. It's also about accountability, being licensed, regulated, and peer-reviewed. You can't hack your way into knowing how to stop internal bleeding. You can't treat sepsis because you watched a doctor TikTok account. People die from that level of arrogance. Lawyers and judges. Law is not just about arguing passionately on camera or quoting random statutes. It's about case law, precedent, constitutional interpretation, jurisdictional nuance, contract literacy, and ethics. You need a law degree, you need to pass the bar, and you need to operate within a system of rules and regulation that requires a trained analytical mind, not a reactionary influencer. The rise of TikTok legal gurus spouting off pseudo-law without credentials is actively hurting people. It's leading to misinformation, misused contracts, dangerous misunderstandings of criminal or civil procedure. You don't crowdsource justice. You practice law, and that takes school. Engineers and architects. If you think building a bridge is about vibes and inspiration, I urge you to reconsider structural integrity, load-bearing ratios, earthquake proofing, fire safety, electrical systems, plumbing, soil erosion, steel strength, CAD design, zoning laws. We're talking human lives depending on math. And yet you'd be surprised how many people online think architecture is just about pretty sketches and Pinterest aesthetics. It's not. It's science, it's responsibility, and it needs schooling. Yes, you can become a self-taught web developer or UI designer, but try becoming a cybersecurity analyst without knowing network architecture, encryption theory, and legal compliance frameworks. Try managing a nuclear reactor or programming firmware for a pacemaker or building the software for self-driving cars without an advanced grasp of systems, safety testing, and fail-safes. There's room for self-teaching in tech. It's one of the few flexible industries. But even here, the deeper you go, the more formal education becomes critical because stakes get higher. The dangers of everything is self-taught culture. The culture that says, I don't need school, has turned into something darker. A culture that says, I don't need experts at all. And that's terrifying. It's a mindset that equates confidence with competence, undermines the legitimacy of real professionals, spreads dangerous misinformation, breeds conspiracy thinking and anti-intellectualism. When people think a few Google searches equals a doctorate, they stop trusting. Doctors during a pandemic, scientists warning about climate change, economists discussing inflation, historians explaining fascism. They turn education into elitism, and that's how truth collapses. We don't just need workers, we need knowledge keepers. And some jobs must remain sacred, rigorous, and held to a universal standard of education, testing, and ethical obligation. The takeaway: know the line, respect the line. Let's be honest about where we are. Yes, college isn't for everyone. Yes, there are other paths to success. Yes, self-taught skill is beautiful. But let's also be honest about this. Some jobs require gatekeeping because the public needs protection. Degrees, licenses, exams, these are not barriers, they're safeguards. The just figure it out mindset doesn't work when people's health, rights, lives, and futures are on the line. So let's break this false dichotomy. We don't have to be all in on college or all out. We need a world where both things are true. Trades and self-teaching are valid and powerful. Higher education is still critical for many fields. Respect people who went to school, respect people who built their skills outside of it. But most of all, respect the difference between knowledge and qualification. Because in a culture that worships shortcuts, we need to fiercely protect the long road, especially when it leads to lives being saved, justice being served, and systems working safely. Coming up next, we'll talk about how we move forward toward a society where education isn't gatekeeping but gateway building. Stick with me. We are now living in what many have begun to call a post-education culture. What does that mean? It means we are flirting dangerously with the idea that formal education doesn't matter anymore, that credentials are elitist, that expertise is outdated, that everyone's opinion is equally valid, regardless of the knowledge behind it. It's a culture that has been accelerated by the internet, monetized by social media, and weaponized by bad actors. And let's be honest, we're already living with the consequences. Let's unpack those consequences across society, democracy, economy, and individual identity. One of the most corrosive outcomes of a post-education society is the implosion of trust in institutions that depend on expertise. We've seen it in real time. During the COVID-19 pandemic, doctors and scientists were vilified for recommending health policies. Public health became politicized. Epidemiologists were treated as if their PhDs were just one opinion among many. People dismissed peer-reviewed science because they found a TikTok that said otherwise. This isn't just annoying, it's dangerous. The entire social contract of modern life is built on trust in experts. You trust that the airplane won't fall from the sky because an aerospace engineer designed it. You trust that a surgeon knows where to cut. You trust that a judge understands the law. You trust that bridges won't collapse, elevators won't free fall, and nuclear plants won't overheat. But in a culture where formal education is constantly devalued, that trust erodes. And when people stop trusting experts, they don't just trust themselves, they trust grifters, they trust YouTubers who scream louder, they trust algorithms designed for engagement, not accuracy. That's not empowerment, that's mass delusion. In a world where people believe doing your own research trumps years of study, we don't just get curiosity, we get conspiracy culture. When credentials are dismissed as biased, the door opens to flat earth theories, anti-vaccine movements, climate change denial, election conspiracy fantasies, homeopathic cancer cures, financial scams disguised as freedom. Because if you no longer believe in scholars, scientists, researchers, and journalists, you're left to believe anyone who says what you want to hear, regardless of whether it's true. This creates what philosopher Hannah Arendt called the totalitarianism of nonsense, where reality becomes a choose-your-own adventure. And here's the kicker. Misinformation isn't just an accident. It's a business model. It's a political weapon. It's a cult of personality propped up by anti-intellectualism. And the weaker our collective respect for education becomes, the easier it is for misinformation to thrive. Real democracy requires an informed public. It doesn't mean every citizen needs a degree, but it does mean we must all share a basic grasp of civics, a respect for fact-based debate, a willingness to accept truth even when it's inconvenient. But in a post-education culture, what happens? People vote based on memes, not manifestos. People believe leaders who shout the loudest, not the most honest. Policy gets shaped by propaganda, not principles. Complex global issues, climate change, healthcare reform, immigration, inflation, get reduced to 10-second sound bites. That's not democracy, that's a circus. And the scary truth? Bad actors love a poorly educated electorate because the less informed you are, the easier you are to manipulate. It's no accident that totalitarian regimes have attacked universities, censored books and jailed intellectuals because an uneducated population is a compliant one. Let's talk brass tacks. Money and jobs. A post-education culture leads to critical skill shortages in key sectors. Healthcare, we need more nurses, not fewer. STEM fields, science, tech, engineering, math. Teaching, cybersecurity, construction and infrastructure. These are not fields that can be filled by influencers or overnight gurus. They require training, licensing, mentoring, ongoing learning. When society devalues higher education, fewer people pursue those paths. Or they drop out halfway through because they've been told it's not worth it. Result? Empty hospital wards, shortage of math and science teachers, underqualified tech labour, a fragile infrastructure system full of band-aid solutions. Meanwhile, the jobs of the future, AI ethics, quantum computing, climate engineering are racing ahead, and we're not preparing enough people to fill them. Post-education culture isn't just philosophical. It's economic suicide. Let's zoom into the individual level. When education is dismissed, many people fall into false empowerment. They're told they don't need help learning. They're told credentials don't matter. They're told they're just as smart as any expert. And for a while, that might feel good. But eventually, reality hits. They apply for jobs and keep getting rejected. They try to build something technical and realize they don't have the tools. They get scammed by online pseudoscience or crypto schemes. They feel left behind in a rapidly advancing world they were told they didn't need to study to succeed in. Post-education culture sells a lie of equality, not equity, not access, but a flattened world where no one knows anything more than anyone else. That sounds empowering. But in practice, it leads to frustration, lost time, financial loss, and deep disillusionment. Because you can't TikTok your way into being a physicist. You can't manifest your way into being a surgeon. There are no shortcuts for wisdom. So what's the antidote? We'll explore solutions more in the next segment, but let's plant this seed. The antidote to post-education culture is not elitism, it's respect. Respect for lifelong learning, real expertise, trade schools and universities alike, critical thinking and curiosity, the humility to say, I don't know, let me ask someone who does. Because when we stop pretending everyone is an expert, we rediscover the value of learning from each other. We are not saying college is the only answer. We're saying education in any structured, rigorous form is one of civilization's greatest tools. Let's stop letting viral trends mock it. Let's stop letting misinformation replace it. Let's stop letting egos and algorithms drive our future. A society that stops learning stops growing, and a society that stops trusting teachers, scientists, doctors, and thinkers is a society walking blindfolded toward disaster. Coming up in our final segment, how do we rebuild? How do we reinvest in education, rethink what it looks like, and restore a culture of intellectual humility? Stay with me, because it's time for solutions. Let's take a breath. We've covered a lot today, from the cultural shift away from formal education to the dangers of DIY expertise, to the structural and personal consequences of dismissing knowledge. Now it's time to ask the most important question of all. Why does education still matter? In a world that's changing fast, in a job market being reshaped by AI, in a culture increasingly skeptical of credentials and institutions, why should we still fight to protect, reform, and revalue education? Here's why. 1, because learning builds better thinkers, not just better workers. Education isn't just about getting a job, it's about becoming a more thoughtful, discerning, empathetic, and capable human being. It teaches how to ask good questions, how to evaluate sources, how to challenge your own assumptions, how to debate without destroying each other, how to listen, how to write, how to process nuance. In short, education teaches you how to think, not what to think, but how. And in a world flooded with noise, conflict, and disinformation, that skill is priceless. 2, because credentials still protect the public. We need to say this louder. Credentials are not gatekeeping. They are guardrails. If you get on a plane, you want your pilot to have been trained. If you're having brain surgery, you want someone with a medical degree, not someone who just watched a video about anatomy. Credentials, licenses, and degrees exist to protect us all. They aren't proof of perfection, but they are. They are proof of preparation. In a society that still has disease, war, climate change, infrastructure, public safety, and national security to deal with, we simply cannot afford to pretend that gut instinct is equal to rigorous training. Because real progress depends on knowledge. Every leap forward in human civilization has been powered by education. The abolition of slavery required educated philosophers, lawyers, and organizers. The women's rights movement drew strength from books, data, speeches, and schools. Every vaccine ever invented started in a lab, by scientists who trained for years. The technologies we take for granted, Wi-Fi, GPS, smartphones, solar panels, were born in universities, think tanks, and classrooms. You don't get real progress without real knowledge. And that knowledge doesn't come from vibes and Reddit threads. It comes from people who spent years wrestling with hard questions, failed experiments, and unanswered data, and pushed through anyway. If we want to solve the problems of tomorrow, we need to keep investing in the minds that can solve them. Let's not forget, in many parts of the world, people are still dying to learn, still fighting for the right to go to school, still crossing rivers, walking miles, risking violence, just for the chance to sit in a classroom. Why? Because education opens doors, shifts destinies, frees people from poverty, breaks cycles of oppression, empowers people to speak, to lead, to dream. When we in developed nations start to roll our eyes at education, we insult everyone who never had that privilege. We forget that education is not just a tool, it's a torch. And that torch is what has lit the way for every freedom we enjoy today. At its best, education doesn't just fill your head, it shapes your heart. It teaches ethics, civic responsibility, history, so we don't repeat it, the interconnectedness of all things, the humility to admit what we don't know. It teaches you to ask not just, how do I get ahead, but also, who gets left behind? It challenges the ego and nurtures the soul. It gives people tools not just to succeed, but to serve. That's why it still matters. That's why it always will. So no, education isn't obsolete. It isn't a scam. It isn't dead. It's evolving. Yes, it needs to evolve. It must become more accessible, more flexible, more affordable, more relevant to modern life. But don't throw it away. Don't replace it with noise. Don't fall for the lie that you can skip the work and still master the wisdom. There will always be trends. There will always be influencers. There will always be hacks and shortcuts and one weird trick videos. But there is no substitute for knowing what the hell you're doing, and no shortcut for the slow, patient, necessary work of learning how to think. So whether you're in college, in trade school, self-taught with rigor, or still figuring out your path, honor the process, because knowledge is power. And right now, we need all the power we can get. Thanks for joining me on this episode of Cluster Fudge. I'm your host, Alexandra. Stay curious, stay humble, and whatever you do, don't stop learning.